Welcome back to the Built Bodies podcast. I am your host, Alan Jaramillo, and it has been a while. So I took a little bit of a hiatus from the podcast because there was other things in my business that needed attention, and I wanted to spend more time on those things so that when I came back to the podcast, I could really focus on making it special. And I've taken some time away because I ultimately wanted to decide the direction of where this podcast is going to go. So I have come to the conclusion that, a lot of times in the previous episodes, I was trying really hard to make it all polished and whatnot. And I really think that where I can deliver the most value for you, the listener, is sharing just common thoughts that I have around coaching clients and also my own personal fitness experiences that you can take away from and learn and implement in your own life. Now, today's episode is very near and dear to my heart. I wanted to start off with a bang. So I'm going to tell you exactly how fitness helped me pay off $40,000 worth of credit card debt. Fitness has a lot of correlations to finances, and I often find that my clients understand fitness when I compare it to their finances. So I see it as a very powerful teaching tool. Now, I want to start off with a brief story as to how I found myself in $40,000 worth of credit card debt. It wasn't one big purchase, as I'm sure you can imagine. It was kind of like death by 1,000 cuts. A lot of little things added up over time, a lot of poor decisions from a business standpoint that caused me to rack this up over time. There were plenty of times where I made decisions that I thought would help our business, like investing into a $10,000 to $15,000 app. And it didn't pan out the way that I thought it was. And I put it all on my credit card and I was like, I'll just pay for it next month, positive mindset, right? And that ultimately caused me to really put a pause on paying off my debt because it just became so much I didn't even know how to tackle. And it kept snowballing. And during this time, I felt incredibly scared. My scarcity mindset over the course of the last year and a half was off the fucking charts. And if you know anything about trying to be happy and positive, you know that a scarcity mindset is one of the worst things that you can deal with, Ideally, you want to go through life looking for the opportunities, looking on the bright side, looking at the positives, right? But I got so over my head with this that I ultimately had to rely on a lot of the skills that I built up from building my body. And that's what I find so interesting about this story. So my fitness played a huge role in being able to pay off this debt. And I want to share 5 key lessons from fitness that helped me crush my debt. Now, before we get into everything, I do want to share my journey to $40,000 in debt. So I wasn't always in shape. I grew up overweight, and part of becoming overweight is that I avoided taking responsibility for my eating habits, okay? Even when I was a fitness professional, I found myself up to 240 pounds at 5'8", and I was still a trainer at this time, but I wasn't taking care of myself. I was trying to build my business. I was making excuses. I was, getting Dairy Queen after my lifting sessions, and that was because I just didn't have the willpower to say no. So I have a lot of experience, even as a fitness trainer, putting on weight and losing it. And reflecting back on all of this, both my weight and my debt represented areas of my life where I lacked control and accountability. So that brings me to lesson 1 that allowed me to pay off my debt, and that is I had to have an ego death, and I had to accept the truth and ask for help, okay? Now, I talk to a lot of people on the fence about, getting into shape and hiring a coach, for example, when they work with our team. And I think the hardest part a lot of people have is admitting they don't know what they're doing and admitting that if they knew what they were doing, they would have already gotten results by now. And I had to come to the same realization when I was paying off my debt. I had to realize my strategy is not working. I need help. Now, for a lot of people, help looks very different, but we can all agree that more information doesn't necessarily lead to transformation, okay? And part of having an ego death is getting accountability and help. When I started to change my body and really see results skyrocket, it was because I hired a coach. It's because I spent thousands of dollars on a coach, and now I was going to listen to every single thing that that coach told me to do. And as a result, I actually won my very first bodybuilding show doing this, my first and only bodybuilding show. And it was 8 months of prep, and I was paying this coach every single month, hundreds of dollars, and I was being accountable because I had skin in the game. A lot of people expect their behavior to change without any consequence or accountability, like paying for something or reporting to someone. Now, I didn't necessarily have the money to pay someone to get out of debt. I was already in debt. So what I did to hold myself accountable is that I actually told my girlfriend, Jordan, about what was going on. And keep in mind, Jordan and I, at this point in time, had only been dating for maybe a year and a half. And this was something that I was hiding from Jordan for a while. And I felt very ashamed around this, okay? Jordan did not have the same, views on money as I did. She comes from a different family. So the reason I mentioned that is because I was really scared to tell her. It wasn't like Jordan also had a bunch of credit card debt and all this stuff. It wasn't like she had really bad spending habits like I did. I was coming into the relationship with all this baggage, and ultimately I did not want to be the one to bring the relationship down or weigh it down in any way. I felt very ashamed, and this kind of correlates because a lot of people that I talk to on a daily basis via DMs or even calls is like a lot of times they come because they want to be a better example for their partner. They want to take care of their body so that they can regain, that sexual connection. They want to regain that confidence. They want to recreate that fire that they had in the beginning of their relationship, and they want to look good and feel confident in their clothing. And that was really one of my biggest motivators, is that I wanted to be worthy of, being in a relationship with me. And that sounds kind of weird, but if I was dating someone, who didn't have characteristics that I found like attractive, then I would obviously, not find them attractive. And I wanted to be the person that was able to pay off this debt and just not have those types of negative behaviors associated with me. And that's just me personally. Now, the second thing that I did was get very clear on my numbers, okay? And this lesson is a very important lesson as it relates to fitness, because a lot of people might create a budget, okay? But they don't create a budget for their nutrition. And that's why a lot of them fail at their nutrition. So in fitness, you can't really make progress unless you get very clear on what's coming in and out. Otherwise, it's just a guessing game. And debt works the same way. You have to know what's coming in and what's going out. So I made a budget and faced the numbers head on. And this was one of the hardest things to do because you're coming face to face with it. But it's also just like, calculating your macros and tracking them. It's also the least scary part because you realize it's not that bad. And once I made a plan and I had the numbers laid out in front of me, I was like, okay, I just have to stay consistent on this, and then I will be able to pay this debt off by this time. And that was one of the biggest eye-openers for me. And when we get a client coming into our program, we have macros laid out, calories, all that stuff, and we lay out their workouts, their plan, everything's done for you. So you just have to follow it. And as long as you follow it, you get the results. And once I saw that mindset shift and I could see it with the numbers and the data, and I was very diligent in tracking these things, it made the biggest difference for me. Now, one thing that I do want to mention is that I did not become a budgeting fucking genius overnight, okay? And I'm still working on it. I still loosely track a budget. I didn't become an expert. And I feel like that's also the same expectation that a lot of people have with fitness. They expect to start a fitness routine, get amazing at tracking macros right away. They want to, change their body overnight. I had the same thoughts, especially when it comes to paying debt. I had those thoughts earlier in my fitness career, and I had to have the same mindset that I now have with fitness and translate that to debt. It was very difficult. We work with a lot of healthcare workers. We work with a lot of people who work, shift work, and they had to go to school for a very long time to be very good at what they're doing. And sometimes they come into our program and they're not catching on to it very quickly, as fast as maybe they're expecting to, right? And a lot of these habits that you built in your career, they took a while to build, right? So why do we think that fitness is any different? And you can compare this to many different career paths. But that's one thing that I had to kind of wrap my head around in my finances that I already had done in another area of my life, which was my fitness, okay? Now, tip number 3 is going to be prioritizing and building momentum, okay? I do not believe that fitness nor debt is a logical thing, okay? It's a behavioral thing. And so what fitness taught me is that you don't need a perfect plan or the equipment. You just need to start. So that might involve hitting, 2,000 more steps than you normally do in the day. That might involve going to the gym 1 time per week, not 5. It might involve going to the gym and just getting on the treadmill for 10 minutes to warm up, instead of maybe doing a full 60-minute workout, just showing up for yourself, like putting in the reps. With debt, I didn't focus on the highest interest debt payment first. I focus on the smallest to build confidence and momentum. Logically speaking, this doesn't make sense. Because logically speaking, if I'm just looking at the numbers, you might say, okay, you need to pay off the debt with the highest interest rate. However, when you do that, it can become pretty difficult to see yourself making progress. And again, this is all behavioral. If you're doing anything and it doesn't feel like you're making progress, it's extremely easy to quit. So again, separating the logic from the behavioral is very important, both in fitness and in debt, in my personal opinion. So what I did is the debt snowball method by Dave Ramsey. And what that basically entailed is taking the smallest debt, crushing it, and then making minimum payments on all the other ones. I found this to be effective because I got extremely motivated once I crushed one credit card and I moved on to the next one. And that made me enjoy the process and build momentum. In our fitness program, we do something similar. When clients look at their calendar, they can see check marks of the workouts that they did, and they can also see check marks around the nutrition. And we also have gold bars that light up when you hit your nutrition goal every single day. And that becomes almost like a game. And when you gamify something like this, it makes it really attractive to work on that behavior and improve that behavior and make it a habit, okay? Now, budgeting was kind of just like in fitness, that early progress is kind of what keeps you going. So when it comes to getting clients results in our program, normally they start off with a fat loss phase because we know that building muscle requires a lot of patience and it takes a crap ton of time. We usually start with the fat loss phase first because it's really motivating when you see 20 pounds, 30 pounds, 40 pounds go off first, and then you focus on building muscle long term. And that's a strategy that we implemented a while ago, and it really increases the drive to want to continue moving forward, which is the most important thing in the world, okay? So again, separating that logic from the behavioral is really important. Number 4 is that it took me 10 months plus of the consistent work, okay? Now, I had to really think long-term here. Sometimes it takes people years to pay off $3,000 for the credit card debt, and that's because, a lot of times they're not attacking it with a vengeance, okay? They're not being very diligent about it. And the same thing goes for fitness. If you have 20 pounds that you're trying to lose, but you're dabbling in this strategy that maybe doesn't work, you're doing a quick fix here and there, you're not focused on a long-term game plan, something that actually is proven to work, you can tackle the same 20 pounds on and off for years and years and years. And this happens to plenty of people. You may be one of them, right? And one of the things that I had to come to realize is that I had to really work on my discipline, and I had to focus on delaying gratification, okay? And that involved saying no to a lot of different things, okay? I had to get really good at saying no to social events, to spending more money, or purposefully putting my card down and treating friends. I grew up in a family where I saw my father do that all the time. So naturally, growing up, I always wanted to be that guy, that was going to pay for the bill and take care of the people around him because I wanted to be the hero. That's another story for another time. But I realized that that was what got me into the debt, or a big contributor that got me into the debt in the first place. And that's one lesson that I had to learn, is that I couldn't be that person. I had to take care of myself first before I take care of others. And I eventually want to get back to that point, but not go in debt in order to do so. And budgeting was like meal prepping. When you stick to a plan, and even when it's tough, like budgeting and meal prepping are very, they're ways to kind of ensure that you succeed. And they're kind of like the first domino to fall. For example, if you did want to work on your nutrition, if you meal prep, you know that the rest of the week's going to be a breeze because you already have everything prepared. With budgeting, it's very similar. When you budget, you're kind of like meal prepping all of your different expenses for the month, and you know exactly what's coming in, what's coming out. And yes, there is room for variability with both of these examples, but it at least gives you the structure that you need to get started and build that momentum. Now, tip number 5 that I found to help me pay off my debt was ignoring the perfect time myth, okay? Now, with fitness, a lot of people use this as an excuse. It's not the right time of the year, the holidays are here, families coming into town, work's picking up, you name it, there's always an excuse that you can throw out there. And the thing that people don't realize about this excuse is that the perfect time myth assigns responsibility to something other than yourself, right? Like, it must feel kind of good to say, oh, it's not the right time of year, or, oh, work's picking up, so I have to assign responsibility to that thing instead of taking the responsibility on my own. And I always did that, okay? I always said that. And eventually, it got so bad that I just had to face the music and say, you know what, there is no good time for me to pay off this debt. There were many times during the past couple years that I did not want to pay it off. And, I had every excuse in the book. I had a big tax bill. I had unexpected expenses like everyone else. I had different emergencies that I had to pull money out of, that I still did my absolute best to stay on the plan. There was a point in time where I had to take a short break from paying off debt to handle other things. And as soon as I finished handling those things, I got right back on track, okay? So I never took both hands off the wheel. And in fitness, I always tell my clients that when you have work pick up in a busy season, or family comes into town, or it's the holidays, or you go on vacation, you want to keep one hand on the wheel. One hand on the wheel allows you to maintain your progress. If you take both hands off the wheel with your fitness and your finances, you go backward, which makes it way harder to build momentum up in the first place. When someone's on a 20-pound weight loss goal and they lose 8 pounds and then work picks up, it's much better for them to maintain 8 pounds down over the course of a month rather than take both hands off the wheel, go back 8 pounds and feel like they're just back to where they started. And that's why keeping one hand on the wheel was incredibly important over the course of the time it took to pay off this debt, okay? And I had built this debt back up a couple times, and this was the time where I finally was able to wipe it all out. Now, I want to talk about some takeaways, okay, before I wrap up this episode. Debt, like fitness is a mindset challenge as much as a numbers game. And one thing that I would recommend to anyone either tackling their debt or tackling their fitness is to start small, track your progress, and celebrate the wins along the way. I am someone who has struggled over the years with showing myself grace and actually like being a cheerleader for myself. And I don't think that enough of us really realize how important that is, especially in fitness. Like, you can lose 20 pounds and be like, fuck, it's not 40. You can always be pissed about your progress because it's not as much as the next person, right? And that's something that I still struggle with today. So I can't sit here and say that I'm not currently struggling with this, because I feel like shit that I even got myself in that situation in the first place. But I am getting better at it. And I recommend everyone, showing yourself a little bit of grace goes a really long way. And whether you're trying to get fit or pay off debt, the principles are the same. Discipline, consistency, and building momentum and treating it like a behavioral thing instead of just looking at it logically is something that I highly recommend. So I want to thank you so much for showing up to this first podcast back. I'm really, really excited to show you all of the different episodes that I have planned. If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to leave a review. If you want to share it on your story, please do. Get the word out. And I appreciate all that you guys do to support me. I love what I do for work, and I would not be able to do it without your support. So thank you.